Hi again guys, and welcome to another look back into Forza's past, in particular with Forza 4, my personal favourite game of the franchise, and this car, even more specifically, is one of my favourite vehicles of the entire Forza franchise, one which I really hope that they bring back. I could easily see this returning to Forza. It's not one of those super obscure, outrageous choices. It is outrageous, and it is kind of obscure, but it's within a tolerance level. The Mosler is such a good car. It's up there with stuff like the Ascari, the Gumpert, the Joss, a variety of others which have also fallen to the wayside, but unlike those, Mosler is a manufacturer which almost has this attainability to it, which many other supercars just don't have. And I'm not just talking about in the game, even in the real world, the Mosler MT900 is just a pure, simple success story. It comes from a tiny manufacturer, Mosler, of course, an American company, who basically set out to build a race car, but a road car first. So very McLaren F1 in its thinking. And it didn't originate with this car, the MT900, it actually started before that, with the Raptor, and their first car, I believe, was the Consulia GTP, which was used for racing, wasn't particularly pretty, but it got the job done. Much smaller engine, a lot less power, and I believe was even banned because of how good it was. That would unfortunately prove to be something which stuck around with the Mosler brand, because this car, the MT900, was also banned for being so good. And that's the weird thing about the Mosler. It doesn't really debut any particular piece of technology which hasn't been done before. It's not like a fan car, it doesn't have a crazy jet engine or some secretive way of actually having all-wheel drive or active aero. There's none of that. It doesn't really do anything radically different to what you'd expect, but it just does everything that it needs to do outstandingly well, and that makes it a dominant force on the track. Now, this car has been featured sometimes on car shows on the TV. It was on Fifth Gear a while back against a motorbike, if I remember correctly, and also, of course, in the racing world. It has more notoriety than on the road, but the car is basically a mid-engine version of a Corvette, if you want to look at it that way. It's so much more than that, but that's the simplified way of looking at it. It has a Corvette engine, 7-litre V8, naturally aspirated, 530 horsepower. It also puts out a very impressive 515 foot-pounds of torque. Now, when you're putting out that much torque in a car that only weighs 1,125 kilos, as this one does, well, that could run into potential problems, let's say. You need to have enough downforce and enough grip to really make that useful. You could just turn it into a Larry TVR or Shelby Cobra style sports car, but if you want to actually win races, you need to make it work. Again, McLaren F1 style, or Maserati MC12 style. And visually, speaking of those kind of cars, this does bear a undeniable and strong resemblance to the late 90s homologated GT1 road cars, like the Elise and the 911 and the CLK GTR and even the Panos GTR1. It looks like that kind of car, as if this came out in the late 90s and was road legal only because it had to be. However, that's the great thing about a Mosler. It's the other way around. Just like the MC12 and the McLaren F1, it was optimized as a road car first and then taken racing, but with every intention to race from day one. And that, I think, is the better way of doing it. Because as much as I love those homologation cars, like the CLK GTR and all of its rivals, they are awesome. They're often the most expensive cars from their respective manufacturers, and the fastest road versions that the companies have ever built around the track, even to this day, oftentimes. They are just not designed to be on the road. They are allowed to be through technicality, but they're not designed to be. So they're often very uncomfortable, far too loud. They are nicknamed fire-breathing monsters more often than not, and they can be driven on the road. And of course you overlook that if you want to enjoy the car, of course. Any petrol head would. But that doesn't really overlook the fact that they're not supposed to be there. And you can tell that immediately. On the track they feel at home, but on the road they're just not. The difference with a Mosler, or a McLaren, or the Maserati, is that they are road cars, very much so, and then, in almost the reverse way, they're homologated for racing almost, well, as I said, in the opposite direction. So you take a road car with this immense raw ability, and then you make it even better with more downforce, more grip, better tyres, even lower weight, to the point where a car like this doesn't even need more power because it's already fast enough. In the real world, a Mosler like this is capable of 0 to 60 in around 3.9, 3.8, which doesn't sound that remarkable for most supercars, but this has only got 530 horsepower. You need to bear that in mind. No all-wheel drive and way less power than something like a Gallardo, for instance, and yet still you're looking at SLR McLaren or Carrera GT 0 to 60 times. Then, the top-end speed is in the region of, say, 190, 195, which, given its downforce, is again very impressive, and you can even get the GTR version, which has 600 horsepower. It's still a road-legal car. That does 0 to 60 in 3.2 and tops out at 212. From a 600 horsepower supercar, that's less power than almost anything else in that category of the market, and yet it's quicker than most of them. The Mosler is a brilliant car. On the road, you don't hear it talked about that much, which is a shame because it is so good. And one of the brilliant things as well about the Mosler, which you can never appreciate in the game, but in the real world, I personally love it, and it's one of the reasons why I would actually choose to own one if I had that kind of cash, is that because mechanically it shares so many similarities with something like a Corvette, it's actually a remarkably easy car to work on and to find replacement parts for, because it is kind of just a mid-engine Corvette C6R for the road, and that to me sounds like an awesome concept. Now, the Mosler was banned multiple times, various cars, the Consuliere, the Raptor, the MT900, it went through various successes and bannings through racing, but the one consistent thing is that it's brilliant, and on the game, it is as well. Now, the handling is not going to totally forgive you for everything. You can, of course, slip and slide with this car. It is a rear-wheel drive car, after all. However, very few other road cars are as forgiving as this one, and if you're talking the absolute fastest street cars in the Forza franchise around a track, not just in a straight line, then the Mosler is a very difficult one to beat. There are some which can beat it. One in particular which can is the Joss, and the Joss tends to be the one that most people use against it because it does have a top-end acceleration and top speed advantage. But even then, the Mosler is a force to be reckoned with. It's one of my personal favourite cars from one of my favourite manufacturers, and it's one which alone is worth going back to Forza 4 just to drive this car. It's that much of an experience. So overall, that's it for this pick. I certainly hope that they bring this car back. It would be brilliant on either the Motorsport or Horizon games. And yeah, that's it for this pick overall. So I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.